I think we are in a time where most of the recent big AAA titles are coming as a disappointment, and the insane amount of money spent on them doesn't always mean it's going to be a great experience, though sometimes a smaller budget can also mean more creative freedom. The more expensive a game is, the more involved the business side is in its creation in order to protect the investment. This is why AAA games have microtransactions jammed in there these days, even when it's not a good design fit. So in this video, I am going to talk about 10 best AA games that can easily compete with the major AAA titles these days, or at least offer a lot more enjoyable experience despite their low budget. Plague Tale. Now I definitely had to put them on this list. Both of the games were developed by Asobo Studios. Obviously, Asobo Studio isn't a large corporation like Rockstar Games or Ubisoft, so if you are curious to know the budget of A Plague Tale: Innocence and Requiem, especially as they were such great games, only $10 million for Innocence and $25 million for Plague Tale: Requiem. I am very surprised because Requiem looks like a very expensive game to make, and if they managed to make it for only $25 million, then that's a crazy achievement for the studio. Now let's talk about the game. Visually, it's stunning. Starting from vast landscapes to festive markets to the open sea. The architecture of the middle-age buildings is detailed and gorgeous. The level designs were exceptional. The soundtrack is sometimes haunting, other times emotional or festive, and at all times fitting for the atmosphere. The voice acting is incredible. The gameplay is excellent, in my opinion, and very unique and different from other games. It's still a stealth game at its heart, given the relatively fragile nature of the protagonist, but this time you have more options in your arsenal to fight back. Also, the story is the strongest point of this game. In my opinion, the story comes closest to The Last of Us Part 1. It can get as emotional as Red Dead Redemption 2.
We were playing by the river, remember?
A Way Out. A Way Out is a cooperative two-player adventure that has you working together as partners. You start the story as two people in jail who become friends and concoct an escape plan. The plan is to escape and to find and kill the mutual enemy that you both have. This game offers an absolutely amazing gaming experience. The gameplay itself is not phenomenal, but the interactions between the characters, the character development, and the overall storyline are what truly make this game shine. Throughout the entire game, you will find random things you can do with two players like play darts, baseball, basketball, Connect 4, and more. It provides respite from the storyline itself and gives you a bigger meaning for being two players in the same game. I also feel it's a sneaky way to show a relationship is being built between the characters. They start to care for each other. I can't speak highly enough about the story and the dialogue written for the characters. It makes it very believable and authentic rather than just words on paper. It draws you in, and you are absolutely immersed in these two characters' story. The game is an absolute must-play if you haven't experienced it already. Also, the game's budget was only about $5 million. Damn, the studio really did a great job with it.
Just a little more.
Life is Strange. I love the Life is Strange series. It's very different, story-rich, and will make even the coldest of hearts feel emotional. Don't Nod made a wonderful game and has proven that their small team can make an amazing, beautiful, heartfelt game. The pre-production budget for Life is Strange was around €4 million. For comparison, the budget of Don't Nod's previous game, Remember Me, was close to $20 million. A big cut in the budget, but the team still managed to offer a lot better experience than Remember Me in my opinion. Life is Strange is slightly similar to games of the Telltale series. Your choices affect the outcome of the game and make subtle or huge changes throughout. You feel empathy for the characters in the world, and while handling mature themes such as depression, the game grips you to your seat. It is amazing, a masterpiece. The music and art design are unique and aesthetically pleasing, which is a nice change from the usual games we play. I totally recommend playing it.
Use images for selfie expression. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a difficult game for me to rate. Nearly every aspect of this game is done exceptionally well, and the developers have achieved what they intended to. Unfortunately, this game was just not a fun time for me. Due to the subject matter of mental illness and psychosis, it's actually not intended to be a fun game but rather a traumatic experience. The gameplay is simple. It mostly consists of walking around and solving puzzles. Most puzzles usually require you to find symbols within the environment by standing in the right spot and looking at things from a proper angle. There is some Dark Souls-esque combat from time to time in which you have quick attacks, strong attacks, dodges, and parries. Graphically, this game is stunning even after all these years. The environments are as graphically gorgeous as they are aesthetically hideous. The sound design in this game is also incredible, and I would highly recommend playing with headphones only. Throughout the entire game, you hear different voices, and they come from all around you. This is part of the game design and its attempt to simulate a state of psychosis or maybe even schizophrenia, but it eventually became overwhelming. The game is loud and depressing. Hellblade is an experience that not everyone will enjoy, but I would still recommend giving it a try. Also, the game's budget was under $10 million, and with a very small team of only 20 people who worked on making this game, it's really awesome how even a very small team of devs can still manage to deliver an experience close to many AAA titles.
The gods of earth harvest wind and sea.
Detroit Become Human. I can safely say this masterpiece is the most freaking awesome choice-based game ever. Basically, every choice you make or don't make truly affects how the story goes for our main and supporting characters. But let the number of endings speak instead of me. This gem right here has 85 possible endings, and this is what I call nearly endless possibilities. The game's replay value is huge. It is set in the year 2038, in the city of Detroit, where androids have taken over most jobs. They have replaced humans, causing unrest among the population. As a result of a software glitch, these androids have gained free will and refuse to be slaves. The player will follow the story of 3 main characters, each with their own unique story. At the start, the player is greeted by an android in the main menu. This seems like a minor detail, but it actually shows how the developers approach their games and put their heart into their creations. This is one of the most non-linear games, not only in this genre but in general. This game feels like it had a budget of 100 million, but surprisingly it managed to be such a great game with a budget of only 30 million euros, which, trust me, is a lot less than games of this quality from what I've been seeing nowadays.
Look out!
What Remains of Edith Finch. What Remains of Edith Finch is basically a walking simulator. Too bad that many people haven't experienced this masterpiece. In addition to an extremely sad story, the creators gave us an original and highly interactive game full of small details. Personally, I think the storytelling is an absolute masterclass. The only downside of the game would be its short length. I recommend taking your time to look at photos, paintings, clippings, and so on. I highly recommend it. You really owe it to yourself to play this once. It will only take about 2 to 3 hours of your time and is completely worth it. It is probably one of the best indie games out there, but I think you should try to get it on discount.
Then maybe he'd still be here, but I doubt it. I think he'd already made up his mind. That's what I want to remember about my brother.
Atomic Hearts. Atomic Hearts is one of the closest to AAA games. I don't know the budget of it, but I personally would say that it's a AA game, a game that is still indie but is pretty close to AAA. But if we talk about the game, it was definitely not what I expected. I thought this was going to be some serious sci-fi hardcore survival game based around a story, but instead got a sci-fi fever dream. Atomic Heart seems to take inspiration from a lot of familiar titles like Fallout for its world design, a mix of BioShock and Dead Island for its gameplay, and freaking Looney Tunes for its story. This game's story is probably the most psychotic thing I've had to experience in the past 10 years. The gameplay is a tier above basic FPS, allowing you to use as many weapons as you can carry with 3 alternate special powers that try to work in tandem with one another. The game's default difficulty could be hard enough to justify all that. I typically just used my best one and had so much ammo for every gun I settled for just blasting. Overall, I think it's a good game and you should give it a try. Takes Two. This game is absolutely sublime and one of the most unique games I've played. It must be played with 2 players, just like A Way Out. By the way, both of these games are developed by the same studio, Hazelight. Each level is a unique world, with unique tools, weapons, skills that need to be used to progress. This kept the game feeling fresh and exciting, while still having many common threads throughout the entire story. The game is part puzzle, part skill and timing, and all fun. Puzzles were just hard enough to where I only had to YouTube 1 or 2 of them. Overall, execution of the game was nearly flawless, and I would love to play more like this. I think more developers should create such couch co-op adventure games. Also, the budget EA gave to Hazelight was about $3.7 million. It Takes Two also has a rating of overwhelmingly positive. So a job well done again by Hazelight Studios.
Inside the house.
Kingdom Come: Deliverance. First played this game in 2020, around 3 years ago, and honestly, this game requires a lot of patience. It's a game set in realism. Things that would take a few seconds in another RPG take much more time. And I mean time in real life. This is definitely one of the most believable game worlds you can play in. This game has hundreds of hours of content. I had a great time with the game, but I cannot easily recommend this title to anyone. Before playing, the game requires a huge amount of patience from the player to learn the world and to properly interact with its systems. Also, one thing I would like to talk about is the sound design. It's freaking great. Moving on different terrain is very noticeable to the point where you can almost center your horse on roads based on the sounds the hooves make. At the end of the day, I liked this game and would definitely recommend it. Also, this game had a budget of approximately $36.5 million, including marketing costs. Firewatch. Story keeps you hooked. Lovable characters, cool art style, and just a nice game to sit down and play and just immerse yourself in. Although this is one of those games where you just play through it all and then not really replay it ever again. Firewatch is a walking sim that has aged like fine wine. It never feels like an empty exploration game because Campo Santo's narrative commands your attention from the beginning and keeps you guessing until the mystery unravels. While occasionally disorienting, navigating the Wyoming forests and underground caves as a ranger alone with no other person in sight turns solitude and fear into tangible entities and will make you sorely appreciate the sound of another voice, even if it's somebody you've never met. The Wolf Among Us. If you like mysteries, violent noir fiction, detectives, and their atmosphere, this game is for you. It does not have much to offer in terms of gameplay, being rather a simple point-and-click detective game at its core, but the visual design of this game is so beautiful. The game's pacing, writing, atmosphere, and general mythos are all top-notch. All of the characters are interesting, and it's honestly fun figuring out and identifying what folklore the character originates from. It is a mature story that takes place in a noir setting. The Wolf Among Us is a gritty take on various fairy tale characters that have somehow escaped into our world and secretly live among us. The game is a must-play for fans of Detroit Become Human, Life is Strange, or the Telltale Walking Dead series. The Quarry. If you're intrigued by the idea of a 10 to 15-hour interactive movie or a game that blends cinematic storytelling with occasional player input, this is the game for you. The character models, voice acting, and writing are commendable, creating an atmosphere reminiscent of a well-crafted summer camp horror movie. The game's narrative and unique gameplay kept me invested. The game's mechanics are unconventional, and I found them challenging. The gameplay often transitions from one unskippable cutscene to another, with the player deciding a character's demeanor during conversations. Occasionally, you're free to move a character around and search for clues, but these interactions, while engaging, are minor in the story. The game's interactivity increases as the story progresses, a welcome change during the parts where I was less involved. Some characters met their demise due to my lack of attention, which added a layer of realism to the game. Overall, if you're a fan of horror interactive game genre, this game is worth a try.